Okay, welcome back to the Complete Spanish Grammar series by Hello Spanish. In today's video, we're going to continue with lesson 2, part 1 out of 3. These three parts are the irregular conjugations from the present tense. Do not forget that one. Now, we're going to be focusing on irregular verbs, but I would like to do a quick review of the previous video. If you haven't watched it, I highly encourage you to watch that video. Now, in that video, we saw that there are three kinds of verbs in Spanish, right? You have the AR, you have the ER, and you have the IR verbs. Now, when you conjugate verbs in Spanish, you need to get rid of that ending, AR, ER, or IR. And you have to substitute those two letters for an ending, for a conjugation. In today's video, we are going to use the Super Mario theme. So it's quicker to understand and super simple to remember. Now, irregular verbs are divided in three categories or three worlds. World 1 that has 4 levels, World 2 that has 5, and World 3 that is comprised of 11 plus 4 equals 15. But it's not levels in this last one, it's actually just verbs. So it's just 15 specific verbs you need to remember. But as for today, we're going to be focusing only on World 1. Now, in today's video, one thing I want you to keep in mind is that different from the previous one, where you only modify the last two letters, in this one, you have to modify the last two letters. That's conjugation, that's universal to the Spanish language. But you have to focus on the previous one, or sometimes two letters prior the ending. Okay, we're going to be focusing on that one. I will explain you in a moment how that works, but keep that in mind. So here we have the first verb, proteger, which means to protect. It is an ER verb. So as you remember, the ER conjugations is going to be an O for the yo form, ES for the to form, and an E for the he form. Hemos is going to be for the we form, and en is going to be for the they form, the ellos form. If we conjugate the verb normally, the conjugation would be like this. Yo protego, tú proteges, él protege, protegemos, and protegen. But it wouldn't be that easy because we are in the irregular zone right now. Now, if you notice with the pronunciation right now, it doesn't really match one out of the five conjugations, right? Let me pronounce the verb once and then the conjugations. So you can probably hear the one that sounds off. So the verb is proteger, okay? And the conjugations would be protego, proteges, protege, protegemos, and protegen. Did you catch the one that sounds off? Yep, that's the yo form. It sounds protego. So it doesn't really sound like the original verb, proteger. So there is a problem. This is not a phonetic way to do it, but it's the simple way to see it. Now, if you had a verb or you have a verb that has that GE sound, it sounds he, he, proteger. That means that the yo form, you need to have the O sound of the exact same sound. Now, if you put an O to the G, it sounds guttural. It sounds go. So no longer it sounds ho, but it goes to go. So it doesn't really sound like the original verb. So what we have to do is find that O sound. So you have GE and you have to find your O sound. That happens to be, instead of a G, a J. So the verb for the yo form is not going to be written protego with a G, but it's going to be written protejo with a J. That means that we cannot put just an O. but we need to actually modify the previous letter to have the same sound. So it would be protejo. Now, this irregularity happens to be with any verb that has a GER. That's why I told you, not only you have to focus on the ending, but you also have to focus on the letter behind the ending. So any verb that finishes with GER or GIR, either one, actually have both of them have the same irregularity. That's why here you have GE or GI, and you have to find the O sound. So any verb happen, any verb, so if any verb happens to be GER or GIR in the jo only form, and that's really, really good to remember, it's going to be JO, protejo. Now let's see another one, but this time with a GIR. Now, fingir. Fingir is to pretend. It's an IR verb, and it has a G. So it has the same irregularity than proteger. All right, so you have the yo form, tú and nosotros from the verb fingir, which is to pretend. How do you think is going to be the yo form? That's right, it's going to be finjo. What about the tú and the nosotros? That's right, it's finges, and nosotros is going to be fingimos. So, just to summarize once more the rule, whenever you have a GER or GIR in the job only form, you're going to change that G that precedes the ending to a J. So the sound matches. The next category is quite similar to the previous one. Now, the sound is similar, but you have to try to guess now the irregularity. Knowing the first one, the World 1.1, this World 1.2, it should be easy, or easier at least in that case. Now, the verb is distinguir, to distinguish. It's an IR, but also has a G and a U. So the ending sound is gear sound. It's gear. Listen once more. Gear, distinguir. You have the conjugations once more. You have distingues, distingue, distinguimos, and distinguen. And one thing I want to make an emphasis is the we form. Watch out with the we form. If you have watched the video one, you would know that the we form is always different. So if you have an AR, you have an amos. If you have an ER, you have emos. And if you have an IR, you have imos. Keep that in mind because the previous verb, proteger, it was an ER. So that had protegemos. But this time is distinguimos. Watch out with that one. Now, the job form, once more, is going to be the irregular. If you want to conjugate distinguir as a normal verb, you could, but it would look something like this. Distinguo. Now, the original verb, distinguir, doesn't really match, once more, the yo sound from the conjugation. So, distinguir, distinguo. So it doesn't really sound correct. So it cannot be guo. Something needs to be changed. What is that change? Let's see once again. It is phonetic help here. It's not phonetics, but well, it's easier to explain it this way. So you have the verb. The verb is distinguir. It has a GUI sound. It would be gi. We need to find the O sound, and that O sound, it just happens to be a G plus an O. Like the previous one. It was proteger, but if you put only the O, it becomes go. Now we need that go, because the original sound gi needs the O equivalent. So it's going to be ki, go. Ga, ge, gi, go, gu. So this time, the verb should look something like this. Distingo. So we drop the U and we just put the O because of sound, right? It needs to match the original sound. So it would be yo distingo. So what is the rule? Just like the previous one, it's the jaw only case, right? So when you have a verb that finishes with G-U-I-R, in the jaw only form, you're going to have that change. Okay? Let's see another example. Extinguir, to extinguish. Now, extinguish, it's also a G-U-I-R verb, right? It has a G, U, and it's an IR verb. It cannot be an AR or an ER because the rule says it needs to be GUIR. So when you have the yo to a nosotros, once more, how would it be the yo form? That's right. It would be extingo. What about the to form? Yep, extingues. And the nosotros, watch out with the IR, right? Keep this one in mind. Exactly. It would be extinguimos. The world 1.3 is a little bit special because it's actually two rules for one world. Now, here is kind of like a rule that is on top of another rule. Let's show you how they look like. So the verb that we're going to be using here is conocer. It's the verb that you need to know because it means to know. Unfortunately, and probably you know already, Spanish has two verbs that mean to know, but that's another video. Here we're going to be using conocer. Try to remember this one as to know of, not just to know, but to know of something. Okay, so it's a CER verb. Just following the pattern, it's an ER verb, but it has a C behind the ER. So we're going to be using only the gerund to, because probably you already can conjugate the rest of them. And as you can see, it's going to be once more the Joe form only. So you have the to form, and that's going to be tu conoces. Tu conoces. Now, what would it be the Joe form? Well, it would be conozco. But once more, just like the previous two levels, it doesn't really sound similar to the original verb. Conocer and then conozco. Sounds kind of weird. Conozco, yo conozco. No, but it's not conozco. Okay. So what happens here? Well, the rule says whenever you have a verb that finishes with CER or CIR, once more, in the yo only form, you're going to have this conjugation. Conozco. The reason for this one is a little bit more from the conjugation that is from Spanish from Spain, right? If you want to know more about this one, you can you can go and book a class with me on Italki, and I will be explaining you in great detail all these conjugations, all these irregular, giving you a little bit more of mnemonics to greater remembering all these conjugations. But here we're just going to focus on this one as it is like this. You have to add a Z, then a C, and put the O. That Z kind of makes the S sound that you have from the original verb, conocer. So the pronunciation would be conozco. So remember, the rule is CER, CIR, your only form, and then you have conozco. Okay? And that would be the correct conjugation. Now let's see another verb, convencer. Convencer is to convince. So let's see. You have the yo, you have the to form, and the conjugations would be like this: convenzco and convences. But the problem is that it's not convenzco. And here is what I said on this is the rule on top of the rule. What is the rule? Well, if you have a CER or a CIR verb in the yo only form, you're going to have this conjugation, convenzo, but it's exactly the same ending than the verb conocer. So how do you differentiate from these two verbs? Because it's the same exact ending. Well, you have to focus on the previous letter behind the previous letter behind the ending. If you have a vowel, case is going to be a Z plus a C. So conozco. So you have to focus if it's a vowel, what you have behind, or if it's a consonant, what you have behind. So if you have a vowel, ZCO, but if you have a consonant, just a Z. In Mexican Spanish, the Z is pronounced like an S. So it's just convenzo. There's no pronunciation like in Spain, like convenzo or something like that. Okay? So let's see some verbs. You have producir. Notice that it's an CIR and it has a U, a vowel, behind the ending. So how would it be the job form? It would be produzco. For extra points, try to conjugate the we form because remember it's regular, but it's an IR. So try to conjugate that one, put it on the comments. Let's see how you did it. And vencer, vencer is another verb, but it has a consonant behind the ending. So it would be yo venzo, I defeat. Well, point four, it's actually one of my favorite verbs to explain because actually in my classes, I use this mnemonic of a wizard thing to create a story so you can remember this one pretty easy. The wizard idea keeps on going on my classes, so you will have a constant memory to remember this one. So construir, to build. And let's see how is irregular this one. This one is an IR, but it has a U behind. Okay, so it's any verb that has a UIR. So how do you conjugate it? Well, the logical thing would be to say yo construo, but it's not that easy. Okay, so it's not only just putting an O there, it's actually putting a Y and an O. Now, it not only happens to be in the Joe form, but it happens to be on all of them, except the we form, right? That it doesn't have a Y. Now, why it doesn't have a Y? Well, that's why I like to create this story about the wizards. So if you want to know more, once again, book a class. The link is in the description, and I will be explaining you in great detail how to memorize these ones with stories so they are actually easier to remember. If not, well, you just have to remember that when you have a UIR, you have to put a Y between the endings and the verb that is original. So it's not construo, but construyo. Tú construyes, él construye, nosotros construimos, and ellos construyen. All right, so some examples here. Yo escojo la película. I choose the movie. Yo escojo. It was originally the verb escoger. Remember that when you have a GER, you have to change for the sound to match the hair sound. So it has to be a J. Yo escojo la película. Tú extingues el fuego. Here there is a typo. It should be actually, here should be you. You need to have an accent on the two forms. But tú extingues el fuego. You extinguish the fire. In here is not extingues. Keep in mind that one is tú extingues el fuego. And last one is él destruye la ciudad. He destroys the city. Él destruye la ciudad. Here you have a Y and the ending is the E for the he form. So él destruye la ciudad. So the verb originally would be destruir. So you have UIR in this case. Here you have another examples is yo no conozco el lugar. Remember that in Spanish we don't have the auxiliary do or don't. I mean do or does. For the negative form, we just put the negative word no behind the verb. So that would be I don't know the place. Conozco, the verb conocer, which has an O, a vowel behind the ending, is a CER verb. So it would be just conozco. Second, mi hijo no recoge sus juguetes. recoger is to pick up. So my son doesn't pick up his toys. Now here, recoger, the verb original is recoger, but it's conjugated in the he form, mi hijo. So you just put it as a normal verb. If it would be I, then you would need to have changed the O, but also the G to a J. So here's just mi hijo no recoge sus juguetes. And last one, ellos huyen de la ciudad. They escape the city, or they escape from the city. Huyen, remember that the H in Spanish is silent, so we don't pronounce it. We don't say hu, hu. No, it's just u. It's like if we didn't have it. It's just a remnants. But huyen, it has the Y from the conjugation because the original verb would have been huir. U-I-R, you need the Y before the ending. Let's see some conversations. First, I'm going to go slow, then real speed, and then the translation. ¿Qué haces? ¿Recoges hongos? Sí, recojo hongos todos los días. ¿Por qué eliges hongos naranja? Porque sin los hongos no venzo a la tortuga. ¿La tortuga? La tortuga que destruye la ciudad. ¿La tortuga que destruye la ciudad? Sí, la tortuga que ruge y lanza fuego. Real speed now. ¿Qué haces? ¿Recoges hongos? Sí, recojo hongos todos los días. ¿Por qué eliges hongos naranja? Porque sin los hongos no venzo a la tortuga. ¿Tortuga? La tortuga que destruye la ciudad. ¿La tortuga que destruye la ciudad? Sí, la tortuga que ruge y lanza fuego. Mm, sounds like it's Mario, but it's not the video game one. So let's see the translation. ¿Qué haces? ¿Recoges hongos? What are you doing? Are you collecting mushrooms? Hongos is the word for mushrooms. Now, remember, you can omit the pronoun in Spanish. You don't necessarily need to put que haces tú or que tú haces. We just need the verb because it has the ending, and the ending tells you who's doing the action. So, que haces? What are you doing? Sí, recojo hongos todos los días. Yes, I collect mushrooms every day. Once again, the I form is omitted because you don't need it. It's in Spanish just the O that transmits who's doing the action. ¿Por qué eliges hongos naranja? Why do you choose orange mushrooms? Naranja is the color for orange. Porque sin los hongos no venzo a la tortuga. Because without the mushrooms, I cannot defeat, or literally would be I don't defeat, but in English you would need to put the can sound more correct. So I cannot defeat the turtle, la tortuga. Tortuga, turtle. La tortuga que destruye la ciudad. The turtle that destroys the city. La tortuga que destruye la ciudad. The turtle that destroys the city. Sí, la tortuga que ruge y lanza fuego. Yes, the turtle that roars and throws fire. Okay, let's see some practice time. Mario builds the city. So what would be the conjugation for builds? Try to write the sentences in the comments below. La ciudad, the city. Luigi protects the princess. This is kind of like vice versa, but while Mario is building the city, Luigi is protecting the princess. That Luigi. La princesa, the princess. I don't distinguish the R from the P. Probably I need to go to the ophthalmologist to check my eyes, to the eye doctor. So, la R de la P, the R from the P. And we escape from the city de la ciudad. We escape from the city. Remember, escape is the verb huir, so it's a UIR. Distinguir is distinguish, proteger is to protect, and construir is to build. Try to use those verbs to make your sentences in the comments below.